Hey everyone, I'm Mary Beth McAndrews from Dread Central, and I am here today with Brian Clarke, the developer of the new game, The Mortuary Assistant, out now on Steam. Hello, how are you? How are you feeling?
Hey, good. I'm a little tired, but
You
but
know, I
hanging
get
in
it.
there.
That's, yeah. So, okay, The Mortuary Assistant. Can you
Hmm.
tell our viewers a little bit about what The Mortuary Assistant is?
Pretty straightforward in that you play a up and coming mortician's assistant, and you're basically embalming bodies throughout the course of a single night while trying to identify a demonic entity and banish it by burning the body that it's occupying. So that's pretty much the main focus, like the core loop of your game. But as you're doing that, you're going to be experiencing different haunting events and story events and various things that will kind of up the spook level throughout. The whole focus of the game, like what I'm really trying to do is lean heavily into replayability. I
Oh,
feel like
cool.
horror is best enjoyed in smaller doses as opposed to like one really long sit there and feel tension forever. The goal is to have a really, hopefully, really well-rounded feeling experience that makes you want to come back to the mortuary for more, learn more story, uncover more stuff, but in segments where you complete a night shift and feel like you've had a good experience and want to come back. So that's really my focus, is that you play it again and again and again.
Cool. And I like how you use this kind of like, I feel like there's been a spike in people liking job simulator games and like, like cleanup crew and things like that, but then you make
Yeah.
it even scarier. I love that you've made that concept and made it into like a full-fledged horror game.
Yeah, so I get the sim thing a lot, and there's definitely that aspect for sure. But I'm a horror game first, obviously, so I'm trying to like be as realistic as possible with the embalming stuff and make that a core loop that the player is focusing on while these other things are happening. But the real thing that's going on under the hood is this whole system that monitors the player and tries to throw things at them based on what they're doing. So it's not just simple like RNG or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I watch people play stuff. They try to figure out like how things are triggered, and it's not just a simple random table. It's a number of factors checking against each other and choosing things based on what room you're in, where you're looking, things like that. So I'm trying to stay in the job simulator area, but in terms of like giving the player something compelling to do that keeps them occupied long enough to get them distracted. So when I throw something at them, it kind of takes them off edge a little bit and catches them off guard.
That's so mean in the best way possible. I love that. So, what was the research process like for you to for like the embalming techniques and the actual like the mortuary assistanting part of the game?
Yeah. So when I first started, this is actually Mortuary Assistant started as a prototype like 2 years ago, maybe a little more.
Yeah.
And I just did a really simple, like looked up what kind of tools were used, and you would collect the tools, put them on a table, and then you were about to cut the person's neck, and then the body snapped awake, and that was like the end of that little prototype. And people were really into the idea of the embalming aspect. I just thought it was a creepy setting at the time, but really people were compelled by what this profession was. So I knew I needed to really take some time to try and do it as much justice as possible, because anytime you go into emulating someone's profession, a lot of people, those people get a chance to be professionals in something, with like they get to share their knowledge and be like they get to show their competency, and everybody loves that. So I really wanted to make sure that I was as realistic as I could possibly be without letting it drive gameplay. So what I ended up doing was I watched. First of all, it was lots of like reading articles and watching YouTube videos just about the general embalming process and everything. But then
Oh
I
Lord.
started reading like educational documentation about the tools and the processes and things like that. I watched some training videos that are used for actual like mortuary sciences classes. And I really wanted to make sure that what I was doing was what was done. However, what I ended up doing was picking and choosing, sort of. So there's like a mix of new and old tools in the game, and like
Oh,
there are
cool.
certain aspects that I've abbreviated or completely omitted simply because it wouldn't be the best for gameplay. Like the trocar system, people like that a lot because you're poking around in there trying to fill up the body and everything. But there's actually another step to that, which I believe is aspiration, where you're removing everything. And so there's like multiple steps where you're doing essentially the same kind of motion and everything. And I didn't feel that would be interesting to the player to just keep doing the exact same thing like 2 or 3 times. So I decided to just sort of say, that whole process, the draining process is done in the draining part. And then you do the filling with the trocar and that's it, right? And so there's things where the systems are sort of abbreviated, or I've kind of like just left some steps out for the sake of gameplay. But my main goal is to have things realistic enough so that the average player plays it and goes, well, is that how that's done? Is that actually how that's done? And then they go look it up and go, oh yeah, those are the tools and everything. So just enough to be realistic. So I think that lends to the creepiness if they look something up and it's true. So try to stay in there.
That's so cool. And do you want to be a mortuary assistant now?
No, absolutely not. I've spent so much time looking at it.
Absolutely not. So what kind of drew you to the idea of using that profession as the basis for this for a game?
Well, like I mentioned before, it started with a really simple prototype. I was actually I was doing a Kickstarter for a previous game of mine, and I wanted to put out an example of the sort of work that I do just to kind of give people an idea. And I had this prototype that I'd done for Patreon like the Halloween before, which was Mortuary Assistant. And so I was like, well, I'll just put this up there and let people see. And that ended up catching some traction, and a lot of YouTubers played it, and a lot of people really liked it. And so I was like, oh my God, this is something I really need to focus on. It's like, I got to finish this other game, but I really need to do this thing. But when I initially started on that prototype, I was just trying to think of what was a different and creepy setting that I hadn't really seen before, right? And I know people don't like the idea of being in a room with a dead body, I think, for a prolonged period of time.
You know, fair. I don't. I personally, no, thank you.
I had watched I forget what it was. I had watched a random YouTube video about this woman who was an embalmer, and sort of took you in the embalming room with her and kind of showed some of the stuff that was going on. I think it was something like I'm 30 years old and a mortician or something like that.
Yes, I think I've watched that video. Yeah.
So if you watch that, the room that she's in, the embalming room, and if you compare that to the room in the prototype, they're very, very similar. The room that she was in doing the embalming was this very old style, like it just, everything felt antiquated and kind of dirty. Not to say anything mean about their facility. I'm sure it's a very fine facility. It's just something that resonated with me.
You don't have to worry about contaminating the bodies.
Yeah, right. But there was that, and there was also I remember, because it's funny because morticians have commented on this to me. I remember there being a window in this room, and while I was watching this video, I was like, it'd be really creepy if in this setting, if there were things outside there, if this was at nighttime, that sort of thing, right? And then I got lots of comments from morticians just in like Twitter DMs and stuff, that it's like, oh, we wouldn't have a window in our room because of privacy concerns. And then I saw that on Steam too, in Steam comments, and then other morticians weighed in and said, I got a window in my room, so really it's something that could happen, And it's like, it kind of goes back to what I was talking about. People like to show their knowledge in their field of expertise, and I think that's really awesome. I think that's really good to see. I think it's nice to give people those avenues. So I think that experience, seeing that stuff, was sort of what inspired me to go that route. I knew I wanted to do something creepy and weird with dead bodies, but I didn't know what. And then I just happened to I was just like stumbling through YouTube, basically found this thing and was like, oh, well, that's really cool. That could be something. And this was in I built that prototype in, I think, a week, 2 weeks, something like that. So this was a personal jam that I had done for myself on my Twitch. I just decided I'm going to do a game jam for myself. And so I was like, I need something quick. So I didn't even think about it. I was just like, this is a good idea, do that. And so I did that for the jam, and that's what happened, was this prototype. So that's really how it spawned. There wasn't exactly like some like serendipitous moment of like, this is exactly it. it was kind of a culmination of a number of different things being pieced together over time.
Well, that's so cool that now it's a game, like a whole game.
Yes, it's been
That's wild.
a long road to it, but yeah.
Yeah, sleepless nights,
Few.
exhaustion.
Yeah,
But
a little
what
bit.
has it been like to get you? You kind of touched on this a little bit, but getting that feedback from actual morticians, like what has that kind of process been like, and how have they kind of reacted to the game so far?
Well, they've been it's been very positive, which has been pretty awesome. It's really every single one of them has been like, it's so cool to see a game that has to do with my profession and everything. They're really excited by it, and that's really awesome to see. It's usually followed up with a critique about something I've done wrong or could be
Oh yeah.
added or something like that.
Mhm.
And then we have the conversation I just had with you about how I've sort of made these decisions on purpose for the sake of gameplay, and I'm not,
Yeah.
I'm a horror game first over a simulator, so I'm
Yeah.
trying to walk that line, right? But they've all been extremely helpful. They want to give as much information as possible. They're all like, just reach out whenever you need, and I can get some more information to you. So there were a few that I had talked to a couple times, just asking some generic things for the processes that I use in the game, just to see if they're, in line, and like I'd have an idea for something and check to see if it was like, is this enough in line that it would still be believable? And so, just little bits here and there. But overall, yeah, they've been extremely supportive and excited to see something like this, which is really
That's
cool to see.
that is so cool. And so you love horror games yourself. What are some of your favorite horror games you've played recently?
Recently, actually, so obviously I don't have time to play any games right now, but
Yeah. Yeah.
before really getting into the meat of Mortuary Assistant, I actually replayed. No, I played for the first time the original Silent Hill on PlayStation, because I had never done it before. I was a Resident Evil kid growing
Yeah.
up, and I saw all these other kids playing Silent Hill, and I was like, bah, it's just like Resident Evil, And then finally, I was like, oh, I'll give it a shot finally, and tried it. I was like, oh, this is awesome! Like, I totally get what this is all about. So that vibe, even for such an old game, they nailed the atmosphere so well, just mainly with the
Right.
soundtrack. Like, sound is really, really important in horror games. So they had some amazing ambient sounds, just music. I guess it's a lot of like anvil hitting and weird distant stuff and everything, but it was definitely creepy, and it managed to build this tension with me, even, you know decades after it was made,
Yeah.
whenever that was. So Silent Hill definitely is a huge one. I think PT is a big one for everyone.
Ugh.
The little
R.I.P.
demo, yeah. It's very unfortunate, and I, like everyone else, was like, it should, since it never got made, I should definitely try to make something, just, I should try to make something in the same
Everyone
vein,
wants to
and
make their
everyone
own
in the world. So
PT.
I decided,
Yes.
nah, I'll take some inspiration from those things, but I didn't want to go straight PT route, but it is a huge influence because it's just so well done.
Yeah.
But in addition to games, a lot of my influence is actually from movies.
Oh, cool.
I really like the concept of trying to marry the sort of the feeling and experiences from film into games. Not necessarily in, like, Kojima style, where it's just like a 50-minute long cutscene before a game that's 2 minutes long, but like elements where this is actually sort of how the haunt system, the they're not really jump scares, kind of, in Mortuary Assistant, kind of came to be, was I really liked in horror movies where the viewer sees something but the protagonist doesn't, and
Oh,
it's
it's my
like there's
favorite. It's my one of my
yeah.
favorite horror tropes. It's so
So
cool.
I was like, well, what if I could somehow emulate that in a game? And that's where the idea of, I guess, what's kind of become like a silent jump scare thing, or I don't know. It's like, I think of it as discovery,
Okay.
where the player, instead of the game taking your camera and saying, here's a spooky jump scare, the player will see something, and they'll see something out of the corner of their screen, and if they look at it, then it reacts. And that's a whole lot of that system that I have for Mortuary Assistant. Is there's a number of things that monitor the player to decide what to do, but it doesn't do anything until the player sees it. And if you don't see it, then it recycles back through the system to get used again. If it does get used, you don't see it again for that session, that playthrough. But that was the goal. Was I wanted something that felt like you were naturally experiencing this thing, like that you discovered it, and therefore my hope is that it lends to this feeling of something always being behind you, something always having to look over your shoulder kind of thing. Because if I'm not taking your camera and forcing you to do things, you don't know if something's there. So I actually, for the full game, I have about, I think what it is a little over 100 now different events, everything from like whether it's a small sound, spooky sound in the distance, to like full on you are involved in this sort of all-encompassing horror event, and it escalates like that. The game's built to start out small and get large as things progress. So I'm just trying to give an experience that feels a little bit more natural. There are still moments where I kind of have to take the reins a bit. I think every horror game, like game in general, kind of has to do that if they want to tell a story and achieve something, but in that way. But ultimately, I'd say 90% of what I do is trying to just let the player discover it. And if they don't, they don't. And out of those 100-something events that I've made, I have to accept that most of those probably won't be seen by any one player. And I think that's part of what makes it feel a little more natural, is that they might not see it. And so, it's a gamble, but
That's amazing. So what are some of the horror movies that really influenced Mortuary Assistant, or that were kind of in front of mind while making the game?
So one that keeps coming back is Paranormal Activity. I really like found footage horror.
Oh my God. I just got my first found footage Blair Witch Project and Roy the Curse. I'm a found footage freak. So
awesome. That's great. Yeah, that's a big influence. Just because I'm a huge fan of the like not seeing the horror thing. I don't want to like you see spooky things like spirits and stuff in the game, but never for too long. And that's intentional, because I feel like if you focus on the monster too long, you see the zipper in the back, right? And I don't want to I don't want that to happen. So that's why I think those things like Paranormal Activity and stuff like that resonate really well with me, is because it's spooky stuff happening where you never even see the entity, and it's nice and creepy. And I really like the idea of something that cannot be remedied, like it's stuck with you forever, no matter what. Because I think I like that feeling of helplessness, and that sort of goes in that same range too. Same with movies like It Follows. I'm a big fan of that. And there's, I get asked about like Autopsy of Jane Doe all the time.
Of course, like the one other mortuary movie
but I
out
haven't, but I hadn't actually seen it. Like I hadn't actually seen it when I first made the prototype. I made the prototype and then I made the demo, and then people were like, this reminds me of Autopsy of Jane Doe because of the storminess and everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I should probably watch this because it keeps getting, connected with it. And I watched it. I was like, yeah, I could see that. Okay, cool. And it's like, it wasn't my favorite horror movie of all time, but it was definitely good. And it was cool. It was cool to see. There are worse things to be compared to.
I was going to say, not a bad movie to be compared to.
Yeah, exactly.
My final question for you is, what is the scariest horror game you've ever played?
Scariest horror game I've ever played. Oh, man. Where it actually got me on edge and felt really uncomfortable, honestly, would be PT. I know it's very stereotypical, but I've played lots of horror games, and they're always like, they have some level of immersion that's done really well, and then they have some other aspects that are really gamey, and it can kind of take you out of it. And it's like, that's a huge challenge for horror games anyway, I think, is that you can't take control of a viewer or player's imagination the way that like a movie can, where they're already mentally in the state of like, I'm turning all the lights off and I'm going to get influenced by this spooky thing, right? And in a game, there can be subsystems that aren't as good as other systems, or something's not as fun, or something is too gamey or not gamey enough or whatever, and it can take you out of it. And it's really tough to build an atmosphere where someone gets sucked in and really influenced by it, I feel, anyway. And so playing PT for me was the first one of the first times where I really like felt like I was captivated by this thing to the point where when I was done, I actually had a lasting impression on me still, in the way that, like, saying watching Paranormal Activity had for me, where
Yeah.
I felt really weird going to sleep that night because you're listening for all the little sounds and stuff in your house. I think PT had a very similar experience for me with that. So as kind of cliche as that's become in the horror sphere, it's for a reason, right?
Yeah.
It's really well done. So I think that was probably, uh, I think of all these different games, and really that's the one where I'm like, yeah, okay, that comes up to the front and just bubbles up, and I'm like, that's clearly the one that must have left some sort of impression on me. So
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, Brian, thank you so much for chatting with
yeah,
me
for
today about
sure.
the Mortuary Assistant. I'm so excited for everyone to experience it. It is out now on Steam, everyone. So please go check it out.
Yes, please go and review it and
Review
stuff.
it,
Do all the
please.
nice things that you can. I would greatly appreciate it. It's just me here, and I need all the help I can get.
Thanks again,
Thank you
Brian.
very, very much.